Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the podcast, where today Toby and I are going to be suggesting one transfer that every Premier League club needs to complete this January.
Yeah, we're going to be going through every team in alphabetical order, and let's just jump straight in with the first team, and that is Arsenal. Arsenal was quite a difficult one to do for this, I think, because at the moment they have a pretty stacked squad, and it feels like they almost have two players in every position and a really good backup for each player in their starting 11. So I've gone for maybe one that's a little bit more looking to the future, and that is Bournemouth's Alex Scott. I think he has a really nice profile that could fit as someone to be an understudy to Declan Rice. He's got really good ball carrying numbers, really good passing numbers, and his value at the moment, because he's not a real consistent starter in that Bournemouth side, he's probably starting around 75% of their games, is pretty low. On Transfermarkt, he's only worth 30 million euros they've got him at. So I think that could be somebody they could pick up for sort of around maybe the 40 million pound mark with his age, and obviously the transfer value normally goes for a little bit more than they're worth. So yeah, that is my first shout of Alex Scott.
Oh, I do really like that shout. I think he's a player who is definitely on the rise and going to be a potential star for both Bournemouth and England. I do wonder though, where does he fit into that Arsenal midfield in your opinion? Because you've got Zubimendi, you've got Norgard, you've got Declan Rice, you've got potentially Eze can play there, Odegaard can play there, Marino's more of a centre midfielder than a striker. If Alex Scott were to come in and Arsenal were to sign a midfielder, would there have to be a midfielder who'd have to leave the club?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the aim would be to have him as that left-sided 8 long term. Obviously, he's 5 or 6 years younger than Declan Rice, and maybe somebody to step up once Declan Rice gets a bit older and be somebody in those cup competitions at the moment. And in that case, you'd almost have 2 players per one of those midfield positions, and Mikel Merino as that man who will just play anywhere. So he could end up at left back next season, knowing him, so who knows.
Yeah, I do really like that shout. I think it's definitely one for the future and one that Arsenal could potentially look at, because I did look at their squad and think to myself, they've got too many players and they're all really, really good. I was almost going to say, I'm kind of glad you got Arsenal as your picks, because I wasn't sure I was going to suggest a signing for them, which would have been a little bit of a cop-out.
Yeah, especially after, I think, the summer transfer window that we had, it's difficult. It maybe could have been a left winger as the other option, but with Martinelli and Trossard seeming to play pretty well, yeah.
All right, that's one down, 19 to go, and I'm going next then with Aston Villa. And I thought to myself, they've got some really good players at Villa, and they've got a lot of squad depth, but I think they really need a backup striker to Ollie Watkins. And there's been a couple of names that have been floating around that Aston Villa have been rumoured with already. And I thought I wanted to go for Caio Jorge, the Brazilian the Brazilian striker at Cruzeiro, the top goal scorer in Brazil this season, getting 21 goals and 8 assists in 2025. And apparently they want about £35 million for him, and I think nowadays there's a lot of clubs who are interested in signing Brazilian players, especially directly from Brazil, rather than the typical route of them going to maybe somewhere in Europe first, somewhere like Spain or Portugal. And I think Nottingham Forest are one who do this really well in the likes of Murillo, Cunha, John Victor, Igor Jesus. Chelsea have started to do this with Andre Santos and Estevao. And I think this could be another option. He's only 23, he's 6 foot, and even if it takes him a little time to adapt to the Premier League, I think this is one where he could be backup to Ollie Watkins for now, and then in the future potentially challenge. So I've gone for Caio Jorge, the Brazilian 23-year-old from Cruzeiro.
Yeah, I think like you said, that'd be a really good time for Villa to sign a striker, given that he's not going to have to be going straight in. Maybe if Watkins was seeming like he was a little bit older, they'd need a more immediate replacement. But yeah, exactly. Somebody to come in as that understudy. Daniel Marlon has done that job at times this season and has played well in games, not so well in others, and not the most consistent player, but maybe doesn't feel like that natural sort of number 9 that I think Villa really like to play with. And Marlon is more of a good squad player, somebody who can play on the wings as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good shout for Villa to start looking for that backup striker now.
Yeah, and I do hope that potentially 30 to 35 million pound euro fee that's been touted, I hope that isn't too much for Villa, because obviously they've been hampered with PSR, and it's unfortunate because those rules seem to be going and changing. So maybe this is one where they can think about 35 million and go, do you know what, in an outlay for our future, that could be something that could be really effective and a payoff in the long term, especially considering what they ended up getting for John Duran. So we'll have to wait and see. But you're up next with Bournemouth.
Yeah, this was Another one that was a little bit difficult, because again, Bournemouth have got a pretty well-rounded squad at the moment, and they're not going to be going out and splashing the cash over the January transfer window. Um, I have looked at their sort of individual players and tried to see maybe who is underperforming, and statistically, it has been their goalkeeper Petrovic, who has actually been the worst performer for post-shot expected goals in the entire league this season. He's on minus 4.4, so he's letting in nearly 4.5 more goals than would be expected based on XG. So I have gone for James Trafford of Manchester City. We know that he wants to leave Manchester City. He's not getting the playing time. And I think this could be an option for Bournemouth, maybe a loan with an option to buy in the summer. And maybe that option is also in James Trafford's court as well. So he's going to be getting that loan, still in the Prem, getting some really good game time, and then can make both Bournemouth and Trafford could weigh up their options in the summer and see how things go. But I think for now, a quality keeper could really bolster Bournemouth.
I do have to agree. I think Petrovic has been a little bit underwhelming considering how well he did at Strasbourg on loan last season, and then a lot of teams were interested in him. I thought he could be a really good Premier League goalkeeper for a lot of different clubs. James Trafford coming in there, I think that is very ambitious, and I think Man City also do still have Stefan Ortega on their books, I think, so he could very well be the backup goalkeeper to Edison if Trafford was to go. I'm not sure Man City would let him leave on a permanent, not yet, I'd say, but I do think that he has been harshly done by, probably guaranteed the number one spot. But when you sign for a club like Manchester City, you're never going to be guaranteed game time. You've got to go out there and earn it, and I think that was a mistake that Trafford made, and potentially the move back to Manchester City in the first place was probably the wrong move for him. But I think at Bournemouth, under Iraola, that would be a good move for him, at least for 6 months, which I think is probably more likely than the permanent, I'll be honest.
Yeah. A loan at a minimum, I think, could be really good for them. And he's the sort of player who's good with his feet. He'd fit into that Bournemouth style of play under Iraola, as you said.
Yeah, and then I'll go next then with Brentford. And I was looking at Brentford and I was thinking, what do they need? They've got some decent results so far this season. They haven't necessarily played the best football, but I think it's a case of carrying on, just worrying about results and making sure they're not too far in the relegation race. But I'm looking at the depth of the forward options, and I think Carvalho and Malambu have both injured now and out for the rest of the season. Gustavo Nunes is a 20-year-old who's played for Brentford but hasn't made any appearances. Reece Nelson has only played 33 minutes of Premier League football so far this season, which is very disappointing. Dango Ouattara's gone out to AFCON now, so they've only really got Thiago in that number 9 position, Damsgaard in that number 10 position, and the only wingers that it seems that they trust are Keane Lewis Potter and Kevin Schade. So I'm looking at Andrews, I'm thinking he needs maybe a forward to help him out. And I've gone for a free transfer, someone who was previously training with the club, and I think just as a backup option could maybe help them out. I think there'd be no signing on fee. You could probably give him, because of the circumstances, just a pay as you play contract. And that is 35-year-old Michail Antonio. And I know Brentford fans may not like this because obviously he was in that horrendous car crash. He broke his leg, I think ruptured his femur in 4 different places, and he hasn't played professional football since then. But if you think about being a backup to Thiago, someone who you could bring on as an option, and you would only have to give him a contract till the end of the season, a little bit more squad depth, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. And then come next season, when you got your players back injury-free, then you can maybe go for the younger lads again. So I've gone for Michail Antonio for Brentford.
Yeah, I think that's somebody that you could bring on, even if it's for the last 5-10 minutes of a game. Somebody who's quick, somebody who's strong, can really put in a battle or even help you sort of see out a game. And he's obviously somebody who's played across so many positions in his career. You could even maybe see him in that system as a right wing back if needed, considering that's where he used to play before moving to a striker. So, like you say, it's low risk, potentially low reward. You might not get too much out of him, but the position that Brentford are in, they wouldn't really want a high risk transfer. So I think that's a pretty sensible shout.
Yeah, especially since they signed players like Christian Eriksen after his cardiac arrest. They got Damsgaard on the books, who has reactive arthritis. So they're definitely used to having those players who not a lot of other teams want. And I think they could definitely do something with Michail Antonio. Like I said, I think he wouldn't ask to be paid much. You can probably give him a pay-as-you-play contract, and there wouldn't be much of a signing on fee, and just be for 6 months. I think it's also a feel-good football story. So I think Brentford are the type of club that, not too many fans hate, if we're being completely honest. So I think that's a sensible transfer for me. You're up next with Brighton and Hove Albion.
Yeah, another club who seem to do very well in the transfer market and getting the best out of their players. This has always been the case for me for Brighton, and I feel like if I could have done this for the last 4 seasons and it would have been the same position, it would have been a striker. And in this instance, I've looked at Brighton and thought their transfer model is great. They're great at signing young players, but they do. I think it's the strikers where they've struggled, and the best performing striker has been Danny Welbeck, somebody with experience, somebody who has scored goals. So I have gone, and I think Brighton need to just get an experienced, decent striker in, and I've gone for Alexander Sorloth from Atletico Madrid. He is 30 years old, so he's not going to be the most expensive, probably around the £30 million mark. He's somebody who has scored goals for the last 3 or 4 seasons, somebody who is not in favour at Atletico at the moment, with Julian Alvarez being their main striker. And still, given the restriction in his minutes that he's had this season, his output has still been really, really good. His output at Sociedad was great. His output in the international team was great. He's like 6'4", 6'5", physical, the perfect sort of build for a striker that Brighton want and how they play. And I think he would be that missing piece in the puzzle where Brighton may actually hit their XG for once instead of underperforming it. So yeah, that's my shout for Brighton.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Brighton need a striker, and it's one where if you think they get that striker, then that could push them up potentially higher up in the table. And also, I don't hate it because yes, Brighton have the model of signing younger players and developing them, but you do need some really established, experienced players to help carry them at times as well. We look at the likes of Lewis Dunk, Danny Welbeck, like you mentioned, James Milner. So many of these experienced players at Brighton help the younger ones. And I think just having a proven goal scorer to take the pressure off everyone else could definitely be the case. Would Alexander Sorloth move to Brighton? I think if it were to happen, it would be a great signing for Brighton, I'm completely honest. So do you know what? Yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah, and I think it would show some real ambition from Brighton to go and sign somebody who's like established and a bigger name. And in suggesting this striker, there's no disrespect to Rutter as well, who's a great player. He's just not a goal-scoring striker. He should be back in the 10 behind somebody like Sorloth. But yeah, it might be a bit ambitious. Trafford was as well, but yeah, we got to throw out some fun names.
Yeah, and he's not so young that he'll stop the pathway for the younger Greek strikers that they signed in the summer of like Kostoulas and Simas as well. So right age profile, depending on the price, that could be a really, really good one. I'm up next then with Burnley, and I've been struggling with Burnley, I'll be honest, because they're kind of being cut adrift from the rest of the pack, and it looks like they might be heading towards relegation again, a third consecutive time in the 3 seasons they've been in the Premier League. And so I thought to myself, do they plan for the Championship next season? And I thought they could, but in the end I decided that what they should go for is a lone player in a forward area to just excite the home fans a little bit and potentially give them a little bit of extra impetus going forward, and maybe they could just excite the fans and maybe give everyone a little bit of false hope that they might stay up in the Premier League. And so I've gone for Chelsea's Tyreek George, because this is a player that I have really high expectations of. He's only 19 at the moment, but he's made 11 appearances for Chelsea so far this season, 3 goals and 1 assist. And when I'm looking at that Chelsea front line, he's got Pedro and Delap in front of him in terms of strikers, and Gui as well. On the left, he's got Gittins and Garnacho, and on the right, he's got Estevao and Neto. He's completely blocked for game time at the moment, and I think it's best that he move on just for loan for now, because I don't think Enzo Maresca is trusting him in the big games to give him those minutes. So I think Tyreek George, give him a bit of game time, give him a run out of Burnley, and he can link up with former teammate Leslie Ugochukwu as well, so he's not completely on his own, even if it is just for a loan. So Tyreek George on loan from Chelsea to Burnley.
Yeah, at the start of the season, he seemed to have maybe a little bit more minutes than he's been getting recently, and he looked really exciting. And I think it'd be good for both, because I think Burnley's expectations maybe are looking ahead in the likelihood that they are going to be going down. A loan move is a sensible, safe option, and for George to be able to go there and get some minutes, I think it'd be great for him and for when he comes back to Chelsea as well. And there's definitely, I think, a pathway for him at Chelsea with how João Pedro and Delap haven't necessarily hit the ground running, that maybe there is a way for him to get into that Chelsea squad a little bit sooner than he would have imagined, and a loan move to a Premier League club would be perfect for that.
Yeah, and I was also a little bit annoyed because Enzo Maresca played him up front at some points in the season early on because he wasn't happy about the fact that Nicolas Jackson left on loan, and he was using him kind of kind of like Mourinho used Sidwell back in the day, giving him the number 9 shirt and playing him as a striker when he had other strikers, but he just wanted more options. So I felt like it did disrespect him a little bit, but he's still only a 19-year-old, and I felt that was a bit harsh on him considering he's someone who's come through the academy as well. So I want to see him get some game time and potentially get himself back into the Chelsea side and prove Enzo Maresca wrong. But speaking of Chelsea, that's who you're up next with.
Yeah, this is another difficult one that I've struggled with because their squad is so massive that it's difficult to suggest players for them more to come in. So this is an area, and that the area is centre back really is something that I think they need to bolster. They've got a lot of options there, but it still feels like Chalobah doesn't quite have that partner, that consistent partner. So I have gone for Strahinja Pavlovic from AC Milan, a left-footed centre-back, 24 years old, who can also play left-back at needed, which was a criteria I was looking for because with Cucurella injured, I'm not sure if the cover there is particularly good at Chelsea. Having a really good season at Milan, who are sitting second in Serie A. He's got absolutely fantastic attacking numbers, I suppose you could say, in terms of passing and carries. Even goals and shots for centre-backs in Europe is super, super high. He's 10%, top 10% in Europe for almost all of these categories. And his sort of worth and his stock is not very high at the moment. I think this would be the perfect time for Chelsea to go in and try and get him, because I think when the summer comes, or even the season after next, when more eyes are on him, I think he's going to be the one to watch in Europe for sure.
Yeah, I do really like the player himself. I'm trying to think of him as a fit for Chelsea though, because he can probably start the left-hand side alongside either a Chalobah or Fofana for now. But then what happens when Levi Colwill ends up becoming fit? Which one of them starts for you?
I mean, at the moment, it would be how both are playing. It's Pavlovic. I think Colwill still has not played as well as he did when he was at Brighton. I think that has been the best that Colwill has played, and I think his time at Chelsea has been a little bit disappointing. And how much time do you give him to sort of get to that, and how long do you just say, right, it's not quite working, let's at least bring in somebody else for competition at least, you know?
Yeah, that's true. And besides, even if Cole comes back and he's absolutely fine, then at least you can go competition, because as we see, Chelsea centre-backs are continuously injured and constantly chopping and changing. I just really hope that if they sign more centre-backs, that they are actually for the first team and they don't get lost in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. Because, yeah, I mean, somebody like Axel Disasi is just, being kicked to the curb. So, yeah.
You got Disasi on your list anywhere for any team?
Maybe. You'll have to wait and see.
Right. Yeah, I'm up next then with Crystal Palace. And there's a few areas that I thought Palace could definitely do with. It definitely seems like they're struggling at the moment with the Conference League and with the Carabao Cup fixtures in between the weekend and Christmas as well. So I feel really bad for Palace. But also, I don't think they've invested enough in the squad depth as they have. And Oliver Glasner, I think, in my opinion, has been a little bit let down. And I think you can really see that with the fact that Danny Munoz has picked up an injury. He's unfortunately had to have surgery on his knee and be out for a short time, 4 to 6 weeks. But I think in his absence, we've seen Borna Souza play at right wing back, we've seen Nathaniel Klein play at right wing back, and neither of those options are really as good as Danny Munoz. And also Glasner's comments, I think, were quite interesting, because he said even though it's only going to be 4 to 6 weeks, you don't know what kind of player is going to be back when he comes back, because he needs to get back fit. So that was a bit interesting as well, considering all the games that Palace have. So maybe he's a little bit worried how he's going to be when he comes back. So I thought to myself that Crystal Palace need a right wing back. But there's also uncertainty about Glasner in his position long term. So I thought a loan signing would definitely come in useful here. And so I've gone for Bayern Munich's Sacha Boey. He's played 14 times for Bayern Munich in all competitions so far this season, but only 6 of those have been starts. And he's 25 now. He's been at Bayern Munich for 2 or 3 seasons. And he hasn't been getting consistent game time because he's been injured a couple of times and he's just never really found his feet there. And it seems like Konrad Lehmann is the first choice right back now. And according to reports coming out of Germany, he does want to leave to get some more game time. And Bayern Munich won't stop him getting a permanent move. But if they can get a permanent move, then a loan one would be great. And I think it's perfect for Crystal Palace. He can play at right wing back. Any Bayern Munich fullback basically plays at right wing back anyway, considering how much they dominate that league. And the fact that he can compete with Danny Munoz, doesn't have to start week in, week out if he isn't quite good enough. I think it's a sign that works out for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think if you've got Lema playing out of his natural position in midfield at right back, it's not a good sign for those behind him, and maybe that trust in Bowie has gone at Bayern Munich, and it would be the time for Bayern Munich to let him go and for him to get a move as well. Would fit really, really nicely. A loan move is sensible, like you say, in case systems change. Yeah, Klein has come in and done a good job, but there is that lack of attacking threat that I think Crystal Palace rely on at that right wing back position, and somebody like Bowie is the perfect provider for that, really.
And even if he does come in and do a good job, which he's capable of doing, is the fact that there's such a stark comparison in the athleticism between Munoz and him that even if he does a good job, it's just not quite good enough to be anywhere near that. And then that puts extra pressure on Mitchell at left wing back, who's always kind of a second fiddle to Munoz, and you don't expect him to do so well. But when he's got the impetus on him to be the one that creates his attacking returns going forward, then that's the worry I think for Palace, and where especially in that wing back system where they're going to really struggle without an out and out attacking wing back, which I think they're going to struggle without Munoz. But when he comes back, he should probably be fine.
Yeah, that's a good shout, that one. I like that. So let's move on to the next club, which is Everton. This was a funny one. I think I knew the position I wanted from the start, and that was a striker. Mainly because Beto has not been scoring enough, really underperforming his XG. Similar situation with Barry. And I think they've both done really well in terms of like holding up the play and link up play with the players behind them. And that was definitely something that I wanted this transfer suggestion to have. But I also wanted that to be combined with somebody who's a good finisher and has a record of being a goal scorer. And I think that's something that Everton are really lacking at the moment, is somebody to start picking up the goals and being the target man for them. So I've gone for a rogue one that I'm maybe not even sure myself on, and that is Artem Dovbyk, currently at Roma, the Ukrainian striker. I just want to see him go somewhere and repeat the form that he had at Girona for that season, that incredible season that Girona had, because he was so good, so clinical. He did all of the hold-up play that was necessary, and he was also he had the pace and the strength to be able to run past that last line of defence as well. So I think he's got both aspects of his game, or at least he had both aspects of his game at Girona. Hasn't quite worked out for him at Roma. He's only got 2 goals and 1 assist in 10 games this season, and only 12 goals in 32 last season. But I think because of that, it's somebody they could pick up for a little bit cheaper and maybe try and reignite that form that we saw a few seasons ago.
I like that. I think Everton desperately do need a striker, and it's difficult because I don't know how long Barry's going to need before he hits the ground running. I think he scored his first Premier League goal a couple of weeks ago, so he's off the mark now, but it's going to take him a while before I think he's prolific. Beto, I'm not entirely sure about, and I think David Moyes, the fact that he's starting Barry ahead of Beto, I think that shows that maybe he's further down the pecking order and he doesn't fancy him either. So definitely a starting striker is needed, definitely one with experience, and definitely one that can hit the ground running. And I think, hopefully, if they've assigned Dovbyk, then David Moyes can just give him a little bit of confidence and go, you're actually really good. We're going to put all these wonderful creative players around you, and you're going to be the man for us. I think the thing is with any striker playing for Everton, though, is can they handle the physicality of the Premier League? Because yes, he's a very tall physical striker, but the Premier League is something entirely different.
Yeah, it is really a step up, but he is the sort of player I think could handle that. And I think if we're having that 3 of Grealish, Dewsbury Hall and Dye behind him, who are players who can cross the ball, who can play it in behind, could work really well on the break or in a game where Everton are having a bit more possession. So yeah, maybe an option. Who have you got next for us?
It's funny actually that you've gone for Dovbyk, because my next team in Fulham, I've actually gone for another striker in Serie A, because I think that's exactly what Fulham need right now. Raul Jimenez is 34 and he's struggling in the latter part of games. I think when he plays the 490, you've also got Rodrigo Muniz, who's out injured at the moment, and he's not always the most consistent. And so I think it's time for Fulham to sign a striker, because I think in terms of the players around them, when they are fit and firing, they are good in quality. But I'm not sure about the striker position anymore. And so I think Fulham need to go out and invest in that position. And so I've gone for 24-year-old Mexican striker at AC Milan in Santiago Jimenez. He's had a difficult time with AC Milan so far this season. When he joined from Feyenoord in last January, he got 5 goals and 2 assists. But this season so far, he's not got a single goal. And I think it's one where he's been a little bit unlucky because he has got no goals from an XG of 2.8. However, the issue is I think he's just really lacking confidence right now. And as a result of that, that's led to rumours of, AC Milan want to get rid of him. There's been rumours of him potentially moving to Galatasaray. I thought to myself, yeah, he could do that, but I think in the right team, in the right system, I still think he's a really quality striker. And this is the one who set the world alight at Feyenoord when he was there. And so I think that a move to the Premier League, a move to Fulham, a lovely area, a nice area to live in, around some other really good players around, and most importantly, under Marco Silva, a manager who can get the most out of his strikers. There was a time when we all ruled out Raul Jimenez. We thought, he was done for. And then he was able to get resurgence out of him, out of players like Willian as well. So I think Santiago Jimenez to Fulham, I think it's the perfect move for both the player and the club.
Yeah, I really, really like that shout. I mean, then you've got Jimenez and it is Jimenez, isn't it? Jimenez and Jimenez. Yeah.
Well, one with the J, one with the G.
Jimenez and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the difference because I have no idea. But yeah, two Mexican strikers up there for Fulham. That'd be really nice. And I think it has been noticeable this season. Raul Jimenez, like you said, has been struggling and maybe not performing as he was last season. Last season he seemed to have a little bit of a better time than he is this year. And I think with Fulham's midfield playing pretty well at the moment in Wilson and Chukwueze and Smith Rowe, having maybe somebody a little bit more dynamic like the AC Milan Jimenez would do Fulham a lot of favours.
I genuinely think it's probably Jimenez and then Jimenez. If that makes, I have no idea. I'm not Spanish either. But let's quickly move on before we're cancelled. You're up next with Leeds.
Yeah, Leeds. Again, this was one that I think I definitely had a position in mind going into this. And at the moment, anyway, it was somebody to play alongside Calvert-Lewin, who is on absolute fire in the Premier League and has finally got his goal-scoring boots on. So I have the sort of player profile I was looking for was somebody who's a little bit more technical, a little bit more of a creator to sit alongside Calvert-Lewin, maybe somebody who can even drop into midfield at times if needed. And I've gone for Ayoze Perez, who is currently at Villarreal, formerly of Leicester and Newcastle, I believe. He's 32 years old now. He's in and around the Villarreal squad. He does seem to start fairly regularly. But because of his age, you could look at a cheap permanent deal, potentially even a loan with an option to buy in the summer. But his creative numbers are still really, really good. And he does play in that position in a two-man striker at Villarreal when he does start. And with him sort of being Prem proven, he has been here before, performed pretty well for Leicester. I think that could be somebody that's a fairly cheap option to sit alongside Calvert-Lewin and try and feed him even more while he's in the form that he's on.
Yeah, I do like that. I think Leeds have got a couple of options right now, but the issue is, even if it's to supplement Calvert-Lewin and play alongside him, he's not guaranteed in terms of his injuries. I mean, touch wood, Leeds fans will hate me right now, but he's not guaranteed. Nemecha isn't guaranteed for injuries as well. And then you're left with pretty much Noah Okafor and Joe Perreault, who Joe Perreault is not getting many minutes so far this season. And Okafor is doing well, but he's not as clinical. So I think maybe another option just to be safe is definitely a safe bet that Leeds should probably take up.
Yeah, I just think with like Okafor, like you said, I just don't. He's sort of. I think with the way that Leeds have sort of changed their system recently, it's almost like shoehorning players in who maybe don't quite fit the system that they have at the moment. Whereas I think somebody like Ayoze Perez is sort of, he has played in this system under Villarreal. He is the perfect sort of second striker at the moment. I would say that's his exact profile.
Yeah, it's also quite difficult to have two big lads up front in Calvert-Lewin and Nemecha. You kind of need a partnership rather than two big men. Right, I'm up next then with Liverpool, and with a couple of options I could have gone for. I think it's mental to say that after the spending that Liverpool did in the summer, that they haven't actually fixed the squad, and it's not a perfect squad, and they definitely do need signings, Liverpool. And you could have gone with the forward, someone like an Antoine Semenyo, but I thought that more than anything, Liverpool desperately need is more centre-back cover, because Joe Gomez is constantly injured, Konate you're not sure about, and the fact that he's got 1 year left on this contract to Real Madrid. Virgil van Dijk isn't getting any younger, and also Leone's out with an ACL injury at the moment. So it is the obvious one. I have gone for Mark Gay of Crystal Palace. He's 25 years old. His contract expires in the summer. But the reason why I think Liverpool should sign him now and not in the summer is the fact that I'm a bit worried that someone's going to get there before Liverpool do. Because after this season where he's played for Crystal Palace and for them in the Conference League, he's going to attract a lot of interest. Then he's going to be starting for England at the World Cup, you'd imagine, as well. So if he has a good tournament there, there's already been rumours like Barcelona and Real Madrid, Bayern Munich are interested in him. And I do think that all 30 of those clubs and every other club across Europe can already talk to him in January with a pre-contract agreement. So I do think that Liverpool run the risk of missing out on their number one centre-back priority from the summer, which they didn't get over the line. So I think they should go in for him in January, pay a bit of money, but it could solve a lot of Liverpool's defensive issues now. And then you still got the second half of the season to go. And that, who knows how much that could be worth.
Yeah, this one's a bit of a no-brainer. I think somebody who was probably in a lot of transfer suggestions for Liverpool in the summer just gone. Even, like you said, if you sign him in January, maybe he goes into that side with the form that Konate is on at the moment. And Van Dijk isn't playing particularly well. And Liverpool's defence is really, really struggling. And at least in looking at the sort of Champions League and FA Cup that you're still in, and the busy sort of period over that sort of start of January, yes, some cover certainly is needed, and Gahey could have an impact now, but it's certainly that sort of long term option for Liverpool in defence.
Yeah, and not even just cover. I mean, he could probably come in based on the performances of the season and play straight at right centre back alongside Virgil van Dijk. And even if you did want to rest Van Dijk, he could then play on the left alongside a Konate or Gomez. But the thing is, in terms of long term, Leone's probably going to be there, but Van Dijk isn't going to be the long term. Konate, who knows? Joe Gomez, probably not. So he comes in and almost weirdly becomes the number one choice centre back for the future. And so that's a weird situation to come in, but one that could be appealing to him if he doesn't have even more appealing offers, which is why I think Liverpool should go for him right now.
Yeah, and like you said, you really don't want to miss out on that because he is a terrific player he's having a great season. Again, really, really good. Okay, moving on to the next team, which is Manchester City, and another player who is having a really, really good season I've gone for Charles de Ketelaere from Atalanta, the Belgian. I don't know what he is. The Belgian attacker. He literally plays up front. He can play as an attacking midfield. He can play on the wing. 6'3", tall. Pretty good at everything. He's got a good shot on him. He's a great carrier, a great passer. And with Manchester City, it wasn't a specific player I was looking for, really. I was just looking for some sort of attacking firepower. Because looking at their bench at the moment, and I know they have got some injuries and obviously Marmoush at AFCON, but it really feels like, especially compared to other seasons, that Manchester City don't quite have that impact off the bench. And I think maybe that's a little bit less noticeable at the moment because of how well they're playing and how well their starters are playing. But I think in a game where, against a low block, maybe it's 0-0 or they're even 1-0 down and they need a change, I don't think they quite have that impact at the moment. Whereas somebody like de Ketelaere can come on in any position and provide an instant threat for them. He would be expensive because he is having a great season and he will be a player in demand come the summer, 100%. But Manchester City, if anyone's got the money, it's them.
Yeah, I do think, weirdly, Man City do need a few more forward options because there are rumours around that Pep Guardiola doesn't want Savio and he might be off to Spurs because Spurs did make an offer for him in the summer. Oscar Bob is returning from a long-term injury but then has just picked up another injury and he might be out for a few more weeks. And then when you think about it, it's Doku, it's Marmoush, who's always on the bench as a backup to Haaland. And then there's really, Ryan Cherky, Bernardo Silva on the right wing, and sometimes maybe Foden, but you don't really want to see him play out there. I do weirdly think that Man City are a forward short in the squad, not necessarily in the first team, because the first team, the way they're performing at the moment is absolutely incredible, and you don't want to disturb that. But definitely as an option, because, again, touch wood, you don't want any injuries, but you definitely do need a backup plan. And if the backup plan is Marmoush, Savio, Bob, on form, I think it's good. But at the moment, it doesn't quite seem to be like it's clicking. So I do think that, yeah, a forward eventually. Yeah, but the thing is, like you said, rightly so, it's just a price tag and how much they're going to want and also how much Man City are willing to spend this January.
Yeah, and Bernardo Silva is a good player you mentioned there because I think De Ketelaere, he is very, very good going forward, but he is also somebody who could potentially even play as like a right-sided eight or as that sort of deeper right midfielder because he's so good on the ball and so good at carrying the ball. Very similar to how sort of Bernardo Silva can play at times. So yeah, could be also potentially a long-term replacement for Silva, getting that he's not even that old, is he? I always think Bernardo Silva is older than he is because he's been around for so long and playing so well for so long, but he is in his 30s now, so yeah, potentially a replacement might be needed.
And his contract is up in the summer, so it remains to be seen if he's going to sign a new one or not. And to the other side of Manchester then, with my transfer, and I really wanted to go with the midfielder because I thought that over the summer Man United signed a lot of really good attackers and they improved the squad, but they already had a lot of really good attackers. And so I think in that double pivot, you definitely need a few more legs than they currently have. And so I've gone for Lamine Camara, the 21-year-old Senegalese international, plays for Monaco. And he's not necessarily a defensive midfielder. He's definitely not an attacking midfielder, but he's a bit more of a hybrid between defensive midfielder and centre midfielder who could do a bit of everything. And that to me is a profile that I really like, and one that I think you need in the midfield too in a 3-4-3. Because if you consider the midfielders that he's playing alongside for Monaco right now in a 4-2-3-1, he's playing alongside former Chelsea loanee Dennis Zakaria. He's a bit more of a defensive midfielder. And in the attacking midfield role, you've got former Liverpool forward Takimi Minamino, who's playing as the attacking midfielder. And then he's kind of alongside them, knitting it all together. And I think that's what he needs because he's really good defensively. He's really good in midfield. And I think that in terms of the legs that he can bring, he's not the tallest. He's not the most aerially dominant. He's only 5'8". But in terms of what he can do, in terms of ground covering, his athleticism, his agility, and on the ball, he averages 6.33 progressive passes per 90, which is exactly what Man United need. And I think he's someone who can come in and immediately improve their midfield because so often this season I've seen Man United not even compete in the midfield battle because they don't have enough bodies and Casemiro or Ugarte aren't really doing the job and they end up going round. And I think it's time that they really start competing in that midfield. And I think bringing in Kamara, I think is a player who can definitely help improve that United midfield and get them competing again in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout, and I think Casemiro has been good this season. I will say that, but given his age and given how he has performed before, I think his form picks up this season. It's not exactly a reliable player at the moment, and that's certainly not the case for Ugarte, who has not had a good Man United career so far, and I don't think is favoured at all by Amorim either. So I definitely think that's a position they should bolster. And somebody like Kamara, given that he's not like a big star yet, it would be a fairly low transfer fee, fairly low risk. I think it would be a sensible move for them as well, especially given it's a January transfer window.
Yeah, and especially with Manchester United, I think so far what we've seen is Casemiro and Ugarte are a lot deeper, and then Fernandes is a lot higher up. But actually, in that two-man midfield, you want it to be a bit of both, where both midfielders can go forward, both midfielders can defend, and it'd be a bit more of a partnership rather than I do this and you do that. I think Kamara could do the defensive side right now alongside Bruno Fernandes. And then in the long term, because Bruno Fernandes did come out with an interview saying United wanted to sell him this summer, that you could play Kamara alongside someone else similar to him and then have like a proper partnership rather than a sitter and an attacker. And I think that's probably if United are going to stick with Amorim, what they probably need to do long term. So yeah, I've gone from Kamara, but from one United to another, who have you got for Newcastle?
Yeah, this one for Newcastle is certainly not one for the future like Kamara and some other ones we've had. This is just an immediate sticking plaster, and actually maybe is my favourite shout because Newcastle's defensive injuries at the moment have caused them a massive mess. And we did mention this man earlier in the episode, and it is Axel Disasi. Get him on loan. He can play right centre back. He can play right back. He's not the greatest player, but he will do a job. And I think with a few of their players coming back from injury, even if he's only needed for a couple games, I think the way that Newcastle's defence is looking at the moment with Lewis Miley playing right back, who's done a good job, but he shouldn't be there. He should be in the midfield covering for the injured Joelinton is what it should have been. So yeah, get him even if it's on a really short-term loan, whilst their defence is really, really struggling with injuries.
Did you say this was your favourite pick out of everyone you've done?
Because it just makes sense. Like, Newcastle don't really need any long-term signings. They've got a really good squad. They probably don't have the money in terms of PSR to really spend to spend any money this window. I was looking at their maybe attacking options, but on the right wing they've got Alanga and Murphy. On the left wing they've got Gordon and Barnes. There isn't really a position that I don't think Newcastle need to sign. And I think once they have their full defence fit, they don't need to sign anyone there. They literally just need a player to come in now, do a job, and then they can just sack it off at the end of the season.
See, I do like the idea behind the signing. I will say though, as soon as Newcastle fans hear Axel Disasi, I think they're gonna have the same reaction as me and go, absolutely not. But I do see what you mean about it. He's only gonna be playing 6 games, hopefully no more than that. But if you're gonna have to, if you can get Chelsea to pay a large proportion of his wages as well, then I think I'm down for that. But if he has to play...
His wages aren't big. His wages aren't massive either. His wages are not very high at all. And like you said, with Chelsea paying percentage, they've done that before. Because at least they're getting something rather than getting nothing at the moment. And when he was at Villa on loan, he wasn't bad. He did the job that he needed to do there as well.
As long as Eddie Howe doesn't get him to stop playing with the ball out of his feet and tells him, just defend, and when you get the ball, pass it to your mate who's probably better at passing than you, I am okay with that. But if he's asking him to do stuff with the ball at his feet, hell no. Newcastle can't sign him. But for just a handful of games, sure. Do you know what? Yeah, I don't hate it as much as I started when he first said his name. But Axel Disasi makes it yet again another transfer window. Right. Next up is Nottingham Forest. And I've gone back to League One again because I'm looking to the future for Nottingham Forest because I think they've done a really good job assembling a squad which I think is primarily quality. They've got a bit of a bloated squad right now, so I think the main job for January is to offload a lot of the players that they have, make sure they condense it down so they're not leaving players out for the Europa League squad and the Premier League squad as an example. But I think they need to be looking forward, so a little bit more fine-tuning rather than major surgery. And I think they need to be looking for a potential Elliot Anderson replacement because after the season he's having, I think he's going to be signing for England at the World Cup. There's going to be a lot of teams interested in him, and there's a lot of teams interested in him already. And so I think they need a replacement. And I think buying one in January to then blood them in, who are potentially a little bit on the younger side, my pick, and then to get them ready to go for the start of the next season, I think is the option that I would go for. And so I've gone for Nottingham Forest, Nottingham Forest from League One is Kevin Dunois from Auxerre. He's just 21 years old. He's a French under-21 international. He's played 16 times this season, getting 1 goal and 1 assist. And the thing that I really like about him is that he's incredibly athletic in his movement, a lot like Elliot Anderson. He's solid defensively. He's a great passer. And he's really well-rounded. And I'd probably say his best attribute is the fact that he's great at getting standing tackles, and the fact that he's really good at his vision when he passes as well. And to me, those are two things that I look at with Elliot Anderson. I think he's actually really, really good at that. I've got a few concerns about it because I think he's a little bit lightweight and he's not physically ready for the Premier League. However, at 6 foot tall and at 21, I think there's enough potential in him that I could see him doing somewhat of an Elliot Anderson role, even though I think Elliot Anderson is absolutely brilliant. We've talked about the podcast for years and how great he's been. And I think you get it for about 20 to 25 million at the very most. Auxerre currently 16th in the Liga. He's in risk of relegation. It could be one where you give him a little bit of money before they go down at the end of the season. So I've gone for Kevin Dunois, or if you're really English, Kevin Dunois. I don't know which one it is really, if I'll be honest. Just Kevin.
Yeah, I think that's a good strat for Nottingham to look maybe at what they need in the future because they have got a really big squad at the moment. And in terms of sort of PSR and spending, if Nottingham get a big offer for Elliot Anderson, which I think is very likely from one of the big 6 clubs, given how good he has played, he is top tier potential starter for England in the World Cup, like you said. Then yeah, getting somebody in as a replacement for him before he's even gone and trying to slowly integrate them into that team rather than, okay, Anderson's gone, who's the immediate replacement? So yeah, I like that. It's a good shout.
And especially if you do sign him before you sell Elliot Anderson, well, there's not 100% sure that's going to happen because we know what Marinakis is like. Mo Gibbs-White ended up staying in Nottingham Forest, so who really knows? But if you sign him before you sell Elliot Anderson, then there's no inflated price tag for whoever you sign as a replacement for Anderson. And you could probably get him for less than 25 million, I reckon. So if he's your man, I think it's a no-brainer. But you're up next with Tottenham.
Yeah, I have gone for a left winger for Tottenham. I think the options they have just aren't good enough. I know they've got a few of them now. Kolo Muani can play on the left. Mateus Tel has played on the left. And even Simons is playing on the left a bit. And then you've got Odebert as well, who's also been pushed out there. And I just don't think any of those are good enough for Spurs and the ambitions that Spurs should have. So I have gone for Antoine Semenyo. Spurs should just go out, break the bank, get him. And then when you look at that attacking midfield three of Semenyo, Xavi Simons and Kudus, that is really, really strong. And I think Semenyo will just take that Spurs attack from where it's at the moment to the next level. They need somebody to get some more goals. Semenyo is that man. He's so direct, so good at dribbling. Especially with Spurs, if their left back is inverting, Semenyo is somebody who is really comfortable staying out very wide and then coming in. He can do a job on the right as well. £60 million release clause. Just get it done. He will be going to one of the big sides, I'm sure. If Spurs can get in and get him, I think that would be a great coup for them.
Do you know what? That is exactly what Spurs should do. Sort out the left wing issue and just get a potentially world-class player, but a definite 7 to 8 out of 10 Premier League player already. Someone who's 25, only just turning 26 soon, I think, in the peak of his career. But he will not want to go to Spurs. Absolutely no chance. Not the way that Spurs are at the moment. If they had a better start of the season and Thomas Frank was under a little bit less pressure, I think it would be fine. But I think Semenyo is going to have so many options. I think Arsenal could look at him, Liverpool, both Manchester clubs, Chelsea even, why not? I think he'd be one of their best wingers straight away. But the fact is, I just don't think that Spurs will not have the lure that for Semenyo. And I think while this would be a really good signing on paper, and maybe one on FIFA or EAFC, but I just don't think that Semenyo will want to go to Spurs as much as I think it's be a fantastic signing for them.
The only pull I can think for Spurs at the moment, the way that they're playing, is Thomas Frank just as a manager and how good of a man manager he is. And maybe Bournemouth seeing Iraola at Bournemouth as sort of a similar style of manager, somebody who's really good at getting the best out of their players and plays a similar style of football. Maybe could be a pull, but with Spurs' form at the moment, yeah,
he's under pressure though, isn't he?
Yeah, it'd be optimistic, I think. But again, with the other those sort of big clubs, besides maybe Chelsea, is he a guaranteed starter in those other sides? If he goes to United, you're looking at Cunha. The Arsenal, you're looking at sort of Martinelli and Trossard. Are they going to get pushed aside and Semenyo is the main starter? I'm not too sure. Whereas he definitely walks into the Spurs side.
Yeah, he definitely walks into Spurs. There's no question about that. Mate, I'd take him at Liverpool in a heartbeat. I think we've messed up our transfer into so much. Can you imagine Man United playing wing back as a potential? No. Maybe we should go to Spurs. Maybe that is a great show. Let us know in the comments below. I'm up next then with Sunderland, and a bit like we were talking about Arsenal, I was tempted to go Sunderland don't need a single player because I think they've had a fantastic transfer window so far. They've had a fantastic season so far. Manager's great, players are great, fans are over the moon. Don't ruin it. But if we're going to say there's one position for them, I think they're potentially another winger for Sunderland. I do look at the wingers and I think Traore is 30 now and he's not going to be around forever. Sorry, 30 is young in today's Premier League football, but I just think that he's upgradable and he's 30 is what I meant. Not that 30 is old or anything. And you also look at the likes of Toby, who's playing on the left but potentially prefers the right. Enzo Lafay's playing on the left, but he's more of a midfielder. Adingra, I don't know what's happened to Adingra. He hasn't been playing great when I saw him at the back end of last season for Brighton, and he hasn't played too many minutes for Sunderland this year. So I think another winger. And I'm going for a 27-year-old French left winger who plays for Sassuolo in Armand Lorente. A player who they were linked with actually in the summer but didn't sign for whatever reason, no one really knows. But someone who showed incredible loyalty when Sassuolo got relegated 2 seasons ago. He stayed with them in Serie B, got 18 goals and 4 assists. This season he's only got 3 goals and 2 assists, but I think for me his head has definitely been turned and he's a player definitely who could be on the move, and I think his pace, his dribbling, I think it would be absolutely frightening in this already quality Sunderland side, and to attack add another attacking flair to their stringer bow, I think he'd be a fantastic signing for Sunderland.
Yeah, Sunderland is definitely not. They don't need like a defender. Their defence is really set, really good. Their midfield seems strong. It does maybe just feel like if there's anywhere to improve, it maybe is their sort of creative numbers and their goal scoring could be a little bit improved. But I mean, this is improving on what already has been an incredible season for Sunderland. And like you said, I would not have been surprised if you would have said, don't sign anyone, don't change anything and just carry on exactly as they are, and they will be over the moon. But yeah, a nice bit of attacking firepower for them, I'm sure, certainly wouldn't go amiss.
And you're up next then with West Ham United, your very last pick of the video.
Yeah, my final team, West Ham, a team who are struggling, and a team who are struggling defensively was the key takeaway from their season for me. Defenders, I don't think there's any direct replacements maybe I would make for them, and I was looking more at actually their midfield and what is in front of that defence, and I don't think they're really providing much protection for West Ham's backline at the moment. So I have gone for a defensive midfielder, and I have gone for a defensive midfielder on loan, and that is Johnny Cardoso, the American at Atletico Madrid. He was only signed in the summer from Betis, but has struggled for minutes at Atletico. I think he's only played 4 or 5 times in the league, but somebody who has really elite ball-winning numbers in terms of tackles, interceptions and blocks, and I think it's just somebody who can just sit in front of that West Ham, do the dirty work, get that ball to somebody like Paqueta to move it on. And I think just somebody to shore up their West Ham defence, which has been super leaky this year.
Mate, if West Ham could get Cardozo, that would be an absolutely massive signing for them. And I do think that the loan move is actually a really good option because he's got the World Cup coming up. He's going to be playing at home with the USA. He's definitely going to want to get some more minutes. And I do agree. I was kind of looking at him, but I wasn't quite sure who to go for my teams. But for West Ham, it actually does make sense. Again, the only issue, though, is with the way West Ham are playing at the moment. Will he want to go to West Ham? I think if West Ham could get him, that'd be absolutely massive. But I'm just not sure about it from the player perspective. But he does need game time, and he can speak the language. I'm sure that culturally, it wouldn't take him long to adapt to the Premier League. And I thought he was fantastic at Betis last season. Yeah, I do really like this one.
Yeah, again, like with Spurs, there might be a difficult pull, but a big plus that some of these teams have is that it is London, and that does seem to be a massive factor in transfers a lot of the time. So there's that at least, and yeah, even if not much else.
Yeah, that's true. And then the last team before they get relegated is Wolverhampton Wanderers. What do you do with Wolves? Do you start planning for the future, or do you try and take a gamble and try and stay in the Premier League this year? I think, if we're being honest, and I think most Wolves fans would probably say the same, that they are down and they are going to get relegated this year. Hopefully for them, they don't break Derby's record of the worst Premier League side ever. But with that kind of in mind, of at least trying to break Derby's record and planning for the future as well, I thought that maybe they could start off with their striker department. And with the options of the club at the moment, I think the main one in Jorgen Larsen, he won't be there in the Championship with them. The other strikers, we'll have to wait and see if they stay or not, or if Wolves can even get them off the book. But I thought, get someone who's proven in the Championship, who you know you can score goals, and you can maybe entice them to come to your club with Premier League wages for 6 months for the second half of the season. And then they can be already acclimatised and be the main striker for the start of the Championship season next year. And so I've gone for Derby County's Carlton Morris. The name sounds familiar, the former Luton Town striker who scored 11 goals in the Premier League for Luton when they were there. Last season, he only got 8 goals and 2 assists for Luton, who a struggling side who got relegated again to League One. But yet this year so far, the 30-year-old has scored 10 goals this season, is on course to probably get 20 goals. And the reported fee that Derby signed him from for Luton wasn't announced. It was rumoured to be around £500,000. I think to get him out of Derby, who are just solidly mid-table this season, you probably have to pay a couple million for him. But a couple million for a guy who you hope is going to score you at least 15, probably more, 20 plus seasons next season in the Championship. I think you would be happy to pay for a couple million for him now, especially considering the parachute payments will be coming in the future. So I think it's one where Wolverhampton want to start planning for the future, and they get themselves a 30-year-old in Carlton Morris.
Yeah, and Carlton Morris a reunion with Edwards as well. Obviously, his former Luton coach. A very, very sensible transfer, and maybe it was too big a task for you to find a transfer that would save Wolves' window. I think maybe an Mbappe or somebody might be able to do it but yeah.
Mate, Mbappe needs service every now and then, and I don't think Wolves strikers are getting any at the moment.
Yeah, maybe Mbappe and Bellingham as a duo from Madrid. Maybe they could do a swap deal with Strand Larsen and Hwang Hee-chan for Mbappe and Bellingham, and then maybe they could stay up. But yeah, it's a sensible one. And like you said, looking for the future, I think, is really going to be the only way to go for their transfer window, because 2 points at the moment, they are going down, really. So yeah, a sensible one. I like that.